And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101 Friday evening. Tonight's edition is, of course, going to be Black Matters, Black Matters, Black Matters, Black Matters. Black people matter, and Black people's matters are of great importance. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening. Good evening to you, wherever you are joining us from. Good evening to you. If you're joining us from Guyana, our Guyana, a Guyana that belongs to all of us, good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening, Ansgrove. Good evening, Ansgrove. Working People's Alliance will be coming there with a public meeting on Sunday night. Good evening, Ansgrove. Good evening, Ansgrove. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to Victoria and all the villages on the east coast of Demerara. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, whether your village is an African village or an Indian Guyanese village. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome, everyone. Good evening, Georgetown, our capital city. Good evening. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to you if you're joining us from Essequibo. From Essequibo, good evening. Good evening, Tessa Waterman. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Lynette Fraser. All the bookers from Buxton. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to Politics 101. You're joining us from the East Bank of Demerara. East Bank of Demerara. The Member of Parliament out there, Sister Nima Flubes. Good evening, Sister Nima. Welcome to Politics 101. Marlene Samuels, good evening. Good evening to you. Lynette Scotland. And these are all regulars. I'm getting accustomed to all of you. Sandra Hanover. Yes, Guyana is in the house watching from Grove Diamond. And Grove Diamond in the house. We notice New Jersey in the house. New Jersey in the house, you know, when they were creating the United States of America, there were two plans. You know, one plan from the small states, as they called them at that time, and that plan was called the New Jersey Plan. And then we had a plan from the large states, the Virginia Plan. New Jersey, therefore, is very important to American history. Good evening to all of you who are joining Politics 101 on a Friday night. Good evening, New York. All of New York. New York City, New York State. Good evening to you. Good evening to all the brothers and sisters who are joining us from the South, the old South, the deep South. The deep South. Good evening, Atlanta, Georgia. Good evening to our brothers and sisters. Good evening to you, South Carolina. If you're joining us from North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., welcome to Politics 101, Toronto, Ottawa, Canada. Welcome to Politics 101. And of course, not forgetting our brothers and sisters who are joining us from Europe, England, France. Welcome to Politics 101. Black Matters, Black Matters, Black Matters. Those of you who are joining us from our Caribbean. I noticed my brother Thomas Robertson from Atlanta, Georgia, the home of Dr. Martin Luther King, the drum major of freedom. The drum major, the one who inspired an entire movement that we call the Civil Rights Movement. Hardly a day passes without the name of Martin Luther King Jr. Sometimes in the old days, we would compare him to Malcolm X and said that Malcolm was the warrior and Martin wasn't a warrior, he was a pacifist. And we now know that, as the Americans would say, Martin was bad. Brother had a lot of courage. Good evening to all of you. Good evening, Yuri Westmus, named after a famous Soviet President Yuri Andropov. Yuri. The Westmus family, of course, is a political family in Guyana. Political family. Yuri's father and his uncle, his brother Nigel, his father David Westmus, and his uncle Rory Westmus, who was part of the radical wing of the early PPP, Westmus, Carter, Sidney King, Lionel Jeffrey. They were dubbed the ultra left by Dr. Jagan. Famous family, political family. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening, Gladys. Always here, always with us. My partner, Danet, is in the house. Danet is in the house. Buxtonian, of course. And so tonight is Friday night, and tonight we're going to talk black. We're going to talk black. You see, something is happening in our society right now that we have to bring to the fore. We have to bring it to the fore. You see, whenever any country reaches a very important stop sign, whether it's independence, whether it's emancipation, that country has to deal with its fundamental problems, its fundamental issues. I made reference to the United States just now. When the United States was formed in the 1780s, it had to confront the question of slavery and race. As America is moving from 13 separate colonies to the United States of America, the fundamental question was what to do about slavery, what to do about black people. The Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, which means that if all men are created equal, slavery has to go. And when the founding fathers met in Philadelphia, they had to tangle with that question, what to do about slavery, what to do about race. If all men are created equal, can we create a new nation with this old obscenity called slavery? And America made a deliberate choice. The founding fathers made a deliberate choice. They chose to create a segregated America rather than abolish slavery. They made a choice. The choice before them was nation, a divided nation, a limited nation, or slavery, or getting rid of slavery. They chose to keep slavery, and they created a nation of limited democracy. Democracy for whites only. That was the birth of America. And when you make decisions, decisions have consequences. They deferred the abolishment of slavery. Slavery would not be abolished until almost a century later. They deferred it. They created something called the 3-5 Clause. Says African American, black people, the slaves, the enslaved, were going to be 3/5 of a person, but not for themselves. They counted them as 3/5 for the purposes of representation. The South wanted to count all of the enslaved so that they can get better representation in the US government, the southern states. And the northern states said, no, these people are enslaved, you can't count them. Eventually they came to what is called the 3-5 Compromise. We're going to count them. But for every 3 white people, we're going to count 5 black people. When you get down now to the late 1800s, America had to collide with the question of race again. This time, America wanted to translate from an old feudal agrarian society to an industrial society. Big decision. Industrialization. And the question of race came up again. What to do about black people? The northern states were prepared to get rid of slavery because they argued quite rightly that industrialization needed skilled labor. Not cheap labor, skilled labor. That meant they had to agree to end slavery. The South said, no, slavery is a way of life in the South. And if we have to choose between industrialization and ending and keeping slavery, we are going to keep slavery. And America fought itself. 600,000 and more died. You know, we Americans like to talk about who killing their own people. Well, we killed our own people. 600,000 people America killed as they fought over this fundamental question, what to do about black people. Lincoln, of course, with the Emancipation Proclamation, freed black people in the Confederate States so that the Confederate States could not use black people to fight for them. But he kept black people in the northern states. He kept those black people enslaved. So the Emancipation Proclamation conveniently freed black people in the South so as not to give the southern states the right to use slaves to fight. There was a short period of Reconstruction, and then a deal was made with the South. The federal troops will be removed, and the South promptly instituted segregation. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, the court ruled that black people may be politically equal, but they are socially unequal, and so therefore they ought to be separate. Again, black people are thrown under the bus. What to do about black people? And segregation lasted for another 100 years. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954 said segregation is unconstitutional. And the southern state says, try there. We are not obeying the ruling of the court. And there was massive resistance in the South. The southern states preferred to close schools rather than admit black people. The Eisenhower government had to make a choice: defend black people or again hold the nation together, as they said. In the end, Eisenhower buckled, and the Little Rock Nine, they were able to get into the schools. And it took this Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, to give Black Americans full constitutional rights. And so segregation ended. And we move into the post-segregation era. The question, what to do about Black people, rose its head again. They're here, they're in America, they're not going nowhere. We had the war on crime in the 70s, and the war on drugs in the 80s and the 90s. And those were devices used to contain Black people. Let's come to our Guyana now. Emancipation came in 1838. And the colonials had to decide what to do with Black people. They decide not to set us free. They decide to institute the system of colonialism. What to do about Black people? Keep them as subjects. And then independence came in 1966, and the same question, what to do about Black people? Who governs? The British instituted a system called majoritarian democracy. The majority rules. And what majoritarian democracy meant was that the majority race will rule. And both our major political parties created a majority race out of their racial support. Because that's what majoritarian democracy means. Who governs? African Guyanese were a numerical minority. So in that sense, who governs meant the majority race would govern. But the device of proportional representation mean that Black people could partner with other minority groups such as Amerindians and dissident Indians and govern. And between 1966 and 2020, we had this uneasy situation where Africans and Indians are fighting each other to govern. The big social good was political power. Because as a post-plantation society, our economies were small. So we were fighting over political power because the system says that the majority that wins all the political power and can decide how you will distribute the small pie. And then we came to 2015, 2016. Guyana finds oil. Tremendous amount of oil. Guyana is now going to be transformed from a poor society with little resources to a rich society with more resources than it has ever had. And whenever, as I said, there is a big moment, what? The old question comes to the fore. What are we going to do about our racial competition? And so the coming of oil means it's a defining moment. Still, what to do about these black people? And we came up with a device in 2020. And that device was regime change. To take the representation, the political representation of black people out of power. The compromise made in 2020 between CARICOM leadership, the ABCE countries, the PPP, Exxon, and its allies was that we are going to throw black people under the bus. We are going to boot their representatives out of power. What to do about black people in all societies where there was slavery? The question has always been what to do about those people. 2020, the decision was made to throw them under the bus, throw them to the wolves. Because once you install a regime, that regime is never going to govern as a democratically elected regime. It was installed, so it's going to govern like a despot. It's going to govern like a dictator. It's going to govern like a racial dominant government. It was not democratically elected. It was installed. It has the consequences. It has the cover of CARICOM, the cover of Commonwealth, the cover of the ABC countries, the cover of Exxon, the cover of the, I was about to say the cover of the ass liquors. I will say it. Local ass liquors. And when a government has the cover, it means that that government is not accountable to anybody. Wealth is coming. And if you're poor Indians, you want to benefit from that wealth. And you are prepared to sacrifice class solidarity with African workers and Amerindian workers, so that you will get a little bit more wealth than they would get. And so, from 2020, Africans have been thrown under the bus. They're not part of the social contract in Guyana. They're not part. In 2020, when the elections were going that way, some of us, Vincent Alexander, myself, the WPA, we call for a new social contract where all of the ethnic groups will share the political decision making, because we are now making decision of a big pie. And we call for a new social contract. And they rejected, all of them rejected that new social contract. So there is a social contract. There is a democracy for some and not for others. There's no democracy in Guyana for African Guyanese. You all hear me tonight. African Guyanese representatives in parliament have no say. They are the minority in a majoritarian parliament. No say. And the committees, the two committees that the opposition chair, the PPP use its majority to render those committees toothless. So the entire legislative branch, the people's branch of government, gives no representation to African Guyanese. Democracy for some and not for others. The executive branch is controlled by the so-called majority. When we raise the question of sharing power, Mr. Jagdeo looked us in our faces yesterday and said, we are not sharing power because we don't have shared values. We don't have shared values. We are one Guyana, but we don't have shared values. You see, there's talk about two sides of the mouth at the same time. That's where you're stupidity. When you don't get too much at top side, you talk from both. One Guyana, we don't have shared values. So the man is clear. He's not going to share Guyana. They're not going to share Guyana with us. Democracy for some and not for others. Where is the democracy for African Guyanese? Name me an institution in which African Guyanese have a fundamental and consequential say. Name one. Name one institution where we have some African Guyanese say to balance off with Indian Guyanese say. Democracy for some and no democracy for all. So there is a social contract in the era of oil, a new social contract that includes Barbados and the US and Canada and the Commonwealth, but excludes African Guyanese. Mia Mottley has more say in what's happening in Guyana. Mia Mottley benefits more from Guyana's wealth than African Guyanese. A new social contract. Are you hear me? And I want you all to share this wide. The new social contract excludes black people. Blacks have a majority in the army. They have a majority in the police force. But the leadership of those institutions have sold the integrity of those institutions to the PPP. There's no democracy in the army and the police. They tell the police and the army that we have a democracy. What democracy? I know something about democracy. Thank God to those poor people who raised me. I was able to go to school and read some books. I know something about democracy. There are what we call democratic forms and democratic substance. When you have an election, that is what you call democratic forms or formal democracy. The question after that, what is the substance of that formal democracy? What we call substantive democracy. You are elected at democratic elections. Now, the PPP wasn't democratic, elected at the democratic elections, but let's say they were. Being elected at democratic elections don't make you democratic. The question is then asked, what are your policies? Are your policies? Policies are substance, and election is form. The substance is what you do with that, the proof of the pudding. Do you use that democratic election to continue slavery as the United States did and as South Africa did for a long time? Do you use your democratic election to distribute resources in a racially unequal way? Do you use your democratic election to implement policies that have you breaking down and bulldozing the homes of one ethnic group? You all hear me tonight? Hear me tonight. Democracy is not just election. Election is part of the way to democracy. It's the door to democracy. Democracy is the substance. What is the substance of your governance? We're talking real tonight. What is the substance of your governance? How do you distribute the oil money? Do you distribute it in a fair way or an unfair way? Democracy is substance also. So when I looked at a program on GlobeSpan a couple of nights ago, 2 Indian men and 2 African men, and they were asked to comment on Takuma Ogunse and Ronda Lane's statements. One Indian man said to understand, and I'm paraphrasing him, to understand what Ronda Lane said and Ogunse said, you have to understand it within this context. And he said the first thing, if the vast majority of contracts are going to Indian Guyanese, you have to understand what that sister and that brother said within that context. He was saying that to understand what that brother and that sister said, you have to understand the unequal distribution of resources by the government. An Indian man. I hope I don't get him killed. 2 Africans were on that show. And they both condemned Ronda Lane and Takuma Ogunse in the harshest terms. One of them said, we live in a democracy. And those statements cannot be made in a democracy. Condemn them. So, for that gentleman, a choice between so-called democracy and Black lives, he chose democracy. He's prepared to embrace limited democracy in exchange for Black lives. You all hear me tonight, please. We have to have social cohesion. And those statements are deterrents to social cohesion. So if you have a choice between social cohesion and Black lives, choose. They chose social cohesion. Oh my God. That's where we are as Black people in Guyana. The other Black man said, don't tell me about contracts. Takuma Ogunse is not a contractor. What does he have business with contract? Oh my God. He's not even prepared to entertain the cries of his own people. Are you hearing me? The choice between social cohesion and black people, they chose their social cohesion. Black people's lives, black people's homes, black people's dignity. Jack Dio is making heavy weather about me referring to Gita Chandan as a slave catchers. I want Jack Dio to know they got black slave catchers, plenty of them. And that I was using black slave catchers, not in a literal way because we are no longer slaves. He's not too bright enough to understand the subtlety of language. So, part of Guyana has decided that black people are expendable. If they have to make a choice between telling the world they're a democracy and kicking black people down the step, they're prepared, and they have in many cases done that, kick us down the step. Sisters and brothers, sometimes I ask myself, David, is there something that you don't understand? And then I wake up the next morning and said, there is a lot that I do understand. The PPP and its allies in civil society, its big shot black people allies, foreign forces, they have decided to create a democracy that suits them. You watched the vice president yesterday instructing the police to go and lock people up, and those educated black people sit up there and talk about democracy. Black people are expendable in Guyana. The analysis I made tonight, I want you all to carefully understand what I'm saying. Carefully understand what I'm saying. There is a new social contract in Guyana. The 1966 social contract has been overrun by the 2020 social contract. Jagan argued that the 1966 contract that included a new political electoral system that changed the system from first past the post. Jagan argued that that new system, that new social contract, was unfair to the PPP, unfair to Indians, and he went on a hurricane of violence in 1964. And one of those black men sat up there and said, every time we have had racial conflict in Guyana, black people have killed and maimed Indian people. Educated man said that. Thanks to a book written by A.U. Sequoyah, a little book. A little book, give me a minute. A little book called Next Witness, in which Guyana recorded all the acts of violence in 1961 against black people. It's here. Thank God for that man. I'm going to send this book to that brother who said that every time there's been racial violence in Guyana, black people have beaten up. Slim book, 20-odd pages. And this was Kwayana's. Kwayana was prepared to be a witness to a commission of inquiry on the ethnic violence. That's why it's called next witness. He was not allowed to testify. And he put it in this book that is here today. He has given me permission to reprint this book, because all black people should have it as a defense against these ignorant people. And I say ignorant in the sense of not know, and I don't think they care to know. Indian people, our Indian brothers and sisters, were the aggressors in 61. Black people were the aggressors in 62 and 63. And Indian people were the aggressors in 64. The violence in Buxton, the original aggressors were Africans. But then Mr. Roger Khan and his group stepped in and killed over 400 black people. Kwayana wrote another book called No Guilty Race. That both races have been aggressive to each other. And no race is guilty. But to those brothers, black people are guilty, their own race. What manner of men are they? And so they are prepared. They are prepared to choose limited democracy. Limited democracy means dictatorship. They're prepared to choose that over black lives. They're prepared to choose an empty quest for ethnic unity. When the PPP leader said, I don't want it, they're prepared to throw black people under the bus in the quest for a racial unity that one side political leaders don't want. My brothers and sisters, you may ask, but why, Dr. Hines? Why? Are these people, are they stupid? Are they ignorant? They're not stupid. They're not ignorant. I wouldn't even say that they're racist. But instinctively, normatively in their minds, they've created a value gap. Professor Eddie Glaude, in a book called Democracy in Black, argues that instinctively in the mindset of people, the value of this life, the life that comes with this color, is different from the value of the lives that come with the other color. David Hines would never be allowed as a black man to say certain things about Indian people. And that's why I don't. I concentrate on Indian leaders. I don't, because I know I will never be allowed to say it. But every Tom, Dick, and Harry is allowed to wash them out on black people. Black people can't do business. Black people like sport. Black people this, black people that. And the reason black people are down has nothing to do with the structures of the society. It has to do with choices they make. The insinuation and conclusion is they are of lesser human quality. The new social contract excludes black people. And if black leaders attempt to say, let's change that social contract, they're called racists. Jack Dio said for everyone to hear. He told his Indian audiences that the police and the army would kick their homes down on the Granger. Kick down their homes on the Granger. Was he inciting his audience against the police and the army? Is that sedition? No. No. Those who put together the social contract allowed him to say so. But when Ogunse or myself say anything about the police and the army, Jack Dio instructs the police and army to lock him up. Jack Dio, by statements about the police and the army, that looks to me like clear incitement against the army. But this same man is calling for Ogunse to be locked up because Ogunse said, turn your guns away from the people. He said, turn it in the right direction. And all of them sat up there and they didn't ask, what is the wrong direction? Well, the wrong direction is aiming your guns at black people, your own people. They came to the conclusion that Ogunse, right direction is the government. Ogunse didn't say turn the guns on the government. He said turn it in the right direction. The brother was saying there is a wrong direction. And that wrong direction is black people. But the army, you can spit on a black person and get away with it, a black woman. You can lock up a black lawyer and get away with it. You can kneel on the back of a black woman as they did to George Floyd and get away with it. You can mow down black people's home and get away with it. You can lock up black people at your whims and fancy and get away with it. Why? Because they are not part of the social contract. They are an appendage, according to you. I always tell my students, a man don't get up in the morning and say, I don't like black people, so going out and discriminate against them. I always say, his thought process, his worldview arises from a confluence of developments and ideas. There are ideas in his mind that drive him to do that. So when these people sit down there and say, I give instructions to mow down and bulldoze the house of black people because I don't want to look weak. It's a mindset. I don't have to be strong for Indian Guyanese, but I have to be strong for black people. Sisters and brothers, we are laying it out here tonight. Those policies of the PPP arise from a mindset, a worldview. The PPP operates like the KKK. Check everything they do. They take their playbook from the KKK. The KKK burned homes. The PPP bulldozed homes. The KKK kill black people in their beds. The PPP kill black people in their beds. They're the local Ku Klux Klan. Mindset and policies. I don't know if Jack Dio is a racist. I can't get into his mind. I don't know if Irfan Ali is a racist. I can't get into his mind. I know that they practice racism because of their policies. They've said that I am socializing Black people to create havoc in Guyana. And that I should be in jail. If you are ruling in a democratic way, why do you fear David Hines? Why do you want to get David Hines out of the way? Let the donkey bray. When the Calypsonians used to sing against Eric Williams, he said, let the donkey bray. If David Hines, if everything is wonderful, you're treating Black people nice, David Hines would be speaking in the wind. They want people like me out of the way. They want Rickford Burt out of the way. They want Mark Benchop out of the way. They want all those of us who are speaking out of the way. And they want Aubrey Norton and the PNC to disassociate themselves from us so that they can quote from Aubrey Norton when they're ready to kill the rest of us. Jack Dio quoted from Ganesh and the brothers and the sisters. He quoted. And he said, in his view, their statement was aimed at Aubrey Norton. Jack Dio said that. They're trying to separate and divide us. They're working on Norton. They sent the Chronicle reporter to ask Norton how he can allow David Hines to call his ex-general secretary a slave catcher. They're working on Brother Aubrey because they feel if they can get Brother Aubrey to separate himself and to condemn the rest of us, it will open the way for them to come after us. The new social contract from 2020 does not include Black people. I've laid it out here tonight. So all the oppression of Black people, it stems from something that is rational. It is not PPP's irrationality. Rafidev, who gave the PPP their Indianist, their modern Indianist ideology, tried to bait me, tried to sell me some snake oil for me to say that elections are equal to democracy. And what the thing about is that he passed me because he know better, but he think I don't know better. He never believed a day would come when somebody from the WPA will kick aside democracy, kick aside your snake oil. Your snake oil. You don't define for me what democracy is. You define democracy for yourself and those of your supporters, not me and those who are our supporters. They want to define for us our reality. I am not. Insofar as you all believe that I is a leader, this is one leader, no compromise with them. We define our own reality. We define our own reality. You don't define it for me. I didn't go to school for somebody to define my reality for me. We did not struggle and die in Guyana for somebody to define a reality to us, to tell us we must accept neoliberalism. Brother Ravi quoted from Booker T. Washington, who told black people in America to let down their bucket where they are, stop fighting for rights. That's why they call him an Uncle Tom. He tells them to accept their second-class citizenship. And Ravi Dev quoted from that man in advising black people what they should do. When the social contract, the independent social contract was made, and we became a nation, somebody had to guard the borders. Who did? Somebody had to police the nation. Who did? Somebody had to teach the little children. Who did? Somebody had to nurse the country back to health when it was sick. Who did? Somebody had to guard other people's homes at night. Who did? And while we were carrying out our national duty, others were making money. And today they have the nerves to watch us and tell us that you don't have generational wealth because you can't do business. When we defended this country, we protected this country, we taught this country, we nursed this country back to health, we made the wheels of government turn. We are the civil servants. And today you watch us like beasts who crouch to prey upon some little child. I'm quoting Martin Carter. You know I love Brother Martin. And when I came into politics, I used to say Martin Carter's poem from the platform, you know, while we're keeping the crowd going for Rodney and Rupnarayan and others to go, myself and Karen D'Souza and others, but mainly Karen D'Souza and we would recite poems. So in case you all are wondering how I know Martin Carter poem so well, it started there and it has stuck with me. So now they're using their economic clout in this new social contract to claim supremacy. Our white supremacy in Guyana have black and brown faces. Oh, my brother was so right. Frantz Fanon was so right when he talked about black skins, white masks. Our white supremacy in Guyana is not white. It's brown and black. I have to tell the truth. I have to tell the truth. And let them do what they want to do with me when I'm telling my people and their people the truth. Because the truth will not only set black people free, it will set all Guyanese free. When other groups didn't stand to the national anthem, black people stood. When other ethnic groups refused to put their hands on their chests to recite the pledge, black people did. When others turned their back against our national matrimony festival, black people did. We have given so damn much to this country, and it now reduces us to second-class citizens. They will continue to hear from me every day, every night. And let them deny the truth that cometh from my mouth. We didn't turn our back on this nation. We gave this nation its national songs, its national poems. We were the ones on stage reciting. holding this nation, this fragile nation together. Some of us denied our blackness in order to wrap our arms around Guyana. You all hear me tonight. Hear my words tonight. And use it as a barricade against them. They want to jail me. They want to jail Ogunse. They want to jail Robin Simon. They want to jail all of us because they want the truth to be buried in the nasty cells of their dungeons. What is happening to Black people in Guyana today is not by accident. And they've muzzled some black mouths. They've browsed some black minds. I've gotten some calls from some black people who I thought were fellow travelers. And you know what they're telling me? David, tell your WPA brothers to pull back. Black people are telling us to pull back. They're going to charge you all. They're going to lock you all up. And these are some leaders, you know. I'm not talking about ordinary people. These are some of our leaders. I ain't going to call their name. But I'm telling you, they called me. Asked me to pull back. Trying to tell me there's a charge hanging over Ogunse's head. Cowards as they come. My brothers and sisters, this is indeed the dark time for us. Not the dark like the darkness of our skin, but a different kind of darkness, a wicked darkness. We have become appendages to the Guyanese nation. I said, name me one institution in Guyana. Name me one in which Africans wield decisive power. Not in theory, in practice. We are the majority. We are the majority in the civil service, the public service. But what have they done? They've starved the public servants, make sure they're weak and tired. We are the majority in the teaching profession, but they've starved the teachers. They can hardly walk. They've starved the nurses. They've turned our black journalists. They've turned them into water fetchers. Tonight we came on air and the High Court has said that the president of Guyana acted unconstitutionally when he disbanded the Police Service Commission headed by Brother Paul Slow. A rare victory in the court for us. We must celebrate it, but we must build on it. We come on air tonight where they're saying that they're ready to give back Itpadaji its money. We wait and see. We wait and see. We know that they would not give Itpadaji back that money if we did not fight. Small victories. But we thank God for small mercies. And we must take those small mercies and glue them together. Hold them in our hands, in our fists. Turn them into active defiance. Tonight is another night of denial, but it's another night of overcoming denial. I hope my words tonight have made it clearer to you what we're up against. What we're up against. What we're up against. And so, you come in peace. You came here in peace. I want you to keep coming. I want you all to keep coming out in numbers every night, because they're watching these numbers. They're watching these numbers. They're holed up now in a building. They're holed up now in a building in the middle of Georgetown, watching me and trying to make a criminal out of me, monitoring my words, not for good purposes. If I were them, I would take my words tonight and turn it into a booklet to educate our people. They're sitting in a library right now, in the middle of Georgetown, watching me and hoping to criminalize me. Jack Dio must be sitting in Pradoville watching me. A man from a dead party. But oh God, there are some deads that can make the powerful scramble and get crazier. They really do think that black people are spiritually dead. Brother Orlando Patterson came up with the theory of social death. Social death. That what slavery did was to kill us off socially. But we have always regrouped and come back. WPA was defunct, they say, when Walter Rodney was murdered. They believe only in Good Friday, which is coming up. But they have no idea about Easter Sunday, the third day. They believe only in crucifixion. They have no idea about resurrection. Because they are spiritually cruel. I love you all. Always will. With every ounce of breath, I will stand for you all. I'm not asking you all for votes. I'm not asking you all to give me anything in exchange. There's a higher politics. And that is the politics of humanity. That's the tradition from which I come. I love you all. Have a radical weekend. Convert. Hug somebody and bring them into the struggle. Tell them of Politics 101. Tell them of the hardships of black people. Clean their eyes. Take the boo-boo away from their eyes. Do some work in your own little corner. Not long from now, there will be life after the PPP.